Good morning, everybody. It's Monday, and welcome to Penn Vicarage on this lovely morning. Great to see you, and thank you for joining us for our talk today. Hope you had a lovely weekend, whatever you're doing. Hope you enjoyed the sunshine, and it's great to be together for our talk for this morning. Friends, we are working our way through the Gospel of Matthew, and today we're in chapter 23. Before we just started on Matthew's Gospel, I explained to those who were watching at the time that Matthew's Gospel is great, but I struggle with chapters 5, 6, and 7. 23, 24 and 25. You'll see why in a moment. It's a side of Jesus that we don't see very often. Jesus is in Jerusalem. He's answered a lot of questions, and now you might say he goes on the attack. So here goes. He's addressing the scribes and Pharisees and so on. Matthew 23. I'm going to read you the whole lot in one go. You'll see why afterwards. Let's do it all in one day. So hard hats on, flat jackets at the ready. Matthew 23 in all its entirety. Then Jesus said to the crowds and his disciples, "The scribes and Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. Therefore do whatever they teach you and follow it. But do not do as they do, for they do not practice what they teach. They tie up heavy burdens hard to bear and lay them on the shoulders of others, but they themselves are unwilling to lift a finger to move them. They do all their deeds to be seen by others, for they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long. They love to have the places of honour at banquets and the best seats at synagogues, and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and to have all people call them Rabbi. But you are not to be called Rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all students. And call no one Father on earth, for you have one Father, the one in heaven. Nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant. All who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you lock people out of the kingdom of heaven. For you do not go in yourselves, and when others are going in, you stop them. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you cross sea and land to make a single convert, and you make the new convert twice as much a child of hell as yourselves. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the sanctuary is bound by nothing, whoever swears by the gold of the sanctuary is bound by the oath. You blind fools, for which is greater, the gold or the sanctuary that's made the gold sacred? And you say, whoever swears by the altar is bound by nothing, but whoever swears by the gift that's on the altar is bound by the oath. How blind you are! For which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? So whoever swears by the altar swears by it and everything on it. And whoever swears by the sanctuary swears by it and the one who dwells in it. And whoever swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by the one who is seated upon it. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint, dill, and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. It's these you ought to practice without neglecting the others. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat but swallow a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside you're full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup, so the outside also may become clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside look beautiful, but inside they're full of the bones of the dead and all kinds of filth. You also on the outside look righteous to others, but inside you're full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you build the tombs of the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous, and you say, if we'd lived in the days of our ancestors, we would not have taken part with them in the shedding of the blood of the prophets. Thus you testify against yourselves, that you are descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your ancestors. You snakes, you brood of vipers, how can you escape being sentenced to hell? Therefore I send you prophets, sages and scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify, some of whom you will flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town, so that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Bachariah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly I tell you, all this will come upon this generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you are not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. well, stirring stuff, you might say, this morning. Jesus is certainly on form. Three things briefly today. Firstly, I think one thing it does show us here, this is the side of Jesus that we don't see very often. Many people's pictures of portrayals of Jesus are very, in my opinion, very slushy and a bit too cuddly and a bit too sort of, and it's right to portray Jesus as kind and all that sort of thing. But actually, here's a side of Jesus which is very different. The same side of Jesus you might say when you got angry in the temple. Actually, I'm not sure Jesus was a very comfortable person to be around. Jesus was somebody who said it the way he saw it, who actually stood for what was right and against what was wrong, and was not afraid to speak truth to power. So I think it's important that when we think about the person of Jesus, that we actually remember this side of Jesus as well, and that we don't get too kind of cuddly with Jesus. Remember, Jesus is the Son of God, and in him, he is light. In him there is no darkness, and I think we need to kind of remember that. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing we need to do is we need to hear some of the comments that Jesus used. I mean, he used some pretty flowery language. What does he call them? He calls them hypocrites. He calls them a den of vipers. He calls them whitewashed tombs. He calls them blind guides. He accuses them of straining a gnat but swallowing a camel. This is not very diplomatic language. But let's hear that. I think it's important, especially those of us in any kind of leadership, need to hear some of the comments that Jesus is making. What does he criticise them for? First, I think he criticised them for expecting things of other people they're not prepared to do themselves. That they make demands on converts and make demands on people that they're not prepared to do themselves. I remember a really good head teacher a few years ago telling me, I never expect anyone to do anything I'm not prepared to do myself. And I think that's important to remember that. So that's one thing. I think the second thing he accused them quite strongly of is always trying to look good on the outside, but inside not kind of carrying it through. So he criticised them for enjoying all the best seats at the parties, at banquets, and wearing all the fancy robes and the big flatteries on their foreheads and the long tassels and all sorts, looking good on the outside, but inside being just not right. And we have to be careful on that one, I have to say. I mean, I've got a lovely red cassock with red buttons on, a little red button number, which I love to wear. And on one level, why not? I think it was a great side of the grace of God. But actually, it's important that we have to make sure that we are right in our hearts as well. That we don't just look good on the outside. It's important that we go through it and we're looking good on that we do right on the inside. We have to be good from the inside out. Next, he accuses them of inconsistent teaching. It's things like, the gold on the altar, the offering was sacred, but the altar itself was not, this type of thing. So inconsistent teaching, to make sure that, it's quite simple really. Love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, mind and strength. Love your neighbour as yourself. So their teaching is kind of inconsistent. Their teaching is hypocritical. They seem to be saying one thing and say something else. So they're inconsistent there as well. And finally, he accuses them of banging on and on about the great prophets of the past. But in their own era, they're killing prophets today. So they're kind of glorifying great heroes of the past, but not being heroic, but actually doing to people today what happened to the prophets all those years ago. So they accuse them of hypocrisy there as well. So in all sorts of ways, Jesus says he makes these comments in no uncertain terms to the Pharisees and teachers. And it's important that we do listen to them, that we make sure that we are right from the inside out, that we're not just trying to look good, that our teaching is as consistent as it possibly can be, and that we learn the lessons from the past. So he uses pretty strong words today, but I think it's important that we hear the words that Jesus said, that we're not doing what the Pharisees did in those days. So we ought to just, it's professional, if you like, to actually listen to what the comments Jesus said and take the comments on board and try and learn from them. But finally, and it's important to recognise that this is not some angry rant, actually. Jesus knew what he was doing and he knew what he was saying. And at the end, you get what's really going on. Jesus said these things because he cared enormously. And at the end, he laments, sadly, no longer, he laments over Jerusalem, and he says, I'm so sad, Jerusalem, you killed the prophets, but I love you. So he said, how often have I longed like a hen to gather a brood under her wings, but you wouldn't do it. He has a passionate love for his people. That's why he gets so cross about the situation, because he cares about them so much. And to make the point is this amazing image of the hen who puts her chicks under her wing. Because in those days, fire was one of the greatest dangers in a hen house. In the event of a fire, what the hen would do is she put her wings over her chicks, and the fire would come and she would die, but the chickens would survive. Chicks would survive because they were under her wings. So she'd give her life so they can live. And of course, that's what Jesus did not many days from now. This wasn't some angry rant. This was Jesus pouring out his love for the people, how he so wanted them to get it right. And he says he loves them so much, like a hen gives her life for her chicks. So Jesus was going to go on to give his life for the world and for his people. So this wasn't some angry rant. This was Jesus feeling passionate, standing up for what's right and against what's wrong, but at the same time enormously loving, so much so giving his own life for the people. And Jesus loves us so much. He doesn't just take us as we are. He doesn't just leave us as we are. He wants us to go on in him, and he wants us to live life to the full. And his love for us is passionate and visceral, and that's his love for you and for me. God bless you. Have a lovely day, and more tomorrow.